And thanks for joining us here on PM Express. And yesterday we heard from the finance minister. He was giving us an economic update on the back of the IMF program. He was looking into the future, but also talking about where we are today as a result of the IMF program. It was a positive economic assessment, and also looking at the IMF dividend that we are currently repaying since 17th of May. When this deal was closed. Tonight, let's do a setting reality check, because you're going to bring in the individuals and business community and experts who actually feel the economy. They breathe and live the economy on a daily basis, so we can begin to measure what their reality is as against what the finance minister was saying yesterday. You actually see that some of what the finance minister had said yesterday tallies with what they're experiencing, but some also depart. But a few of the things to look for in the finance minister's session yesterday about some key numbers. And one of the key numbers to look for is 3 billion. We know that because the IMF is giving us that. But also, the important thing for the government is the record time they're getting this. And the quantum they got is 3 times our quota, which is an interesting bit indeed. It's 3 times our quota, and it was front-loaded. A significant part of that is 1.2 billion was front-loaded in 6 months. 600 million is already in. We're expecting the further 600 to come down the line. We have 600 million, which is in our bank already. Now, here's the thing, though. We looked at this. If we look at our quota, indeed, with the IMF, indeed, we got far more than we have been allocated as far as that quota is concerned. But what does that really signal, and how does that help the economy, especially when you talk about businesses, those who actually live and feel and breathe the economy? Now, if you look at the finances that the finance minister is looking at in terms of where the monies are going to come from to transform this economy, multilaterals, he says, are going to give us a certain amount of money, 2 billion this year alone. So that's a lot of money. $2 billion this year alone, 6.2 billion between 2023 to 2026 is what we're expecting to come in. Bilaterals will bring in $30 million this year, 330 million between 2023 and 2026 is what we're expecting, and sort of the monies that are going to come in. And this is all a breakdown that we saw from the finance minister yesterday, giving us an update on the back of the IMF program. And if you look at the further breakdown of this, as I said earlier, 1.2 billion is going to come in this year, 3 billion over the next 3 years. And you have the situation with the World Bank also coming in with 530 million, 1.6 billion by 2026. So there's a lot of money coming into this country. AFDB will also bring its own amount of money. AFDA bringing in $200 million. There's a lot of money coming in. Ghana has a significant goodwill. So what has been the impact of all this nice talk about the money's coming in, the confidence that the bilateral, multilateral partners are reposing in Ghana? Well, the finance minister began to isolate a few of the numbers that will tell you a story of where we are in terms of the IMF dividend, okay? The first one he talks about is inflation. And inflation is a beast because it eats away your income. It eats away what you're getting, and it goes straight into your pocket. It's the biggest thief pocket, if you like, when it comes to taking money out of your pocket and taking food off your table. Inflation. So the finance minister isolated this because if you go back to December 2022, inflation, the rate was around 54.1%. The finance minister cites the point that if you look currently, we are 42.2%. But can you say that this is a direct result of the IMF program? No, you can't, because we know the timing itself tells a story. Because the last one that was announced last week was a result of May, and it's actually an increase of just a marginal increase of rates there. But remember that the IMF deal was signed off on the 17th of May, so this could not be that. The finance ministry themselves estimate that this is possibly because of the fresh taxes that have been introduced on the back of the, meeting some of the IMF prior actions, and of course the increases we've seen in utility tariffs that may have eaten into this, but also food inflation. is also contributing significantly to this. And some of the most interesting things like dog meat, etc., has played a role in this. But for the government, this is positive, from 54.1% to 42.2% is positive. For them, it shows that the economy is beginning to recover. Is that really true? And how are the businesses feeling this in their pockets and in their business? We'll talk about that pretty soon. Also, we look at depreciation of the cedi. According to the finance minister, they've seen some stability, because in December 2022, the cedi, the rate of depreciation was 30%. That was significant. Now, in May 2023, it is at 21.7%. So that is some stability that the finance minister talks about. Again, how is this reflecting on the ground? The business community will join us with a view on this. And the 91-day Treasury bill, and many people, after the crash of the bond market, they started putting their money in there. In December, it shot it up to 35.5%. If you put your money in there at that time, you'd have made a lot of money. But now, the health of an economy is how low the rates will be when you put your money into T-bills. And it's dropping now to 20.6. The lower it is, the better for the economy, because it shows confidence. This is price risk. People price a lot of risk in there and then move the rates up as well. And then another thing that the finance minister talks about is the current account balance, which was in negative. It was in the red. And he says it's now inched into the positive of GDP, 0.9% of GDP. So for the finance minister, this is the strongest indication yet that we're on a path to recovery. What about my experts and the business community? Do they agree? Are they already beginning to see the signs on the back of the assessment yesterday? We'll get them to tell us that. But there is tough time. There are still tough times ahead. Cocoa bills and US-denominated local bonds are still outstanding in terms of restructuring. We believe that will happen. And independent power producers, the government owes them significant amounts of money, in excess of $4 billion. And we know there are meetings currently happening to try and negotiate this, because they've threatened to shut down the power plants by the end of this month if they are not paid what they are owed, or some reasonable arrangement is not reached to pay them that over time. They want $500 million now as part of what they are owed. And so that is a big conversation that must happen. And that's money that government must find to settle them immediately. Organized labor and pension fund, corporate trustees, also that conversation hasn't ended yet, and the talks are still happening on this. This is a very controversial one. We've done many shows here about it as well. Now, if you look at the restructuring that we are looking at, if you look at the total domestic debt that's been restructured already, 85 billion, you will notice that there is a bit more that we didn't get in, which is part of the reason why government is looking at restructuring the cocoa bills, etc. as well. Because if we look at the target of 137 billion, that was the initial target, we didn't get that. We had to revise it down to 132 billion. That was when they first revised it. And then we came down to a second revision of 130 billion. And then where we ended was that figure you see there. I mean, that was the third revision, but this is actually what we got. And so the gap there is interesting. So it isn't all rosy from what the finance minister has said. There are still significant challenges there in terms of mopping up the debt and improving our balance sheet as well going forward. And yes, you see the external debt still has to be restructured. 10 billion of that will still have to be restructured going forward. Let's bring in my guests after this, and let's have a conversation. On the back of the finance minister's press conference yesterday, updating us, there's some transparency there, of course, telling us what the positive outcomes has been on the back of the IMF over the last few weeks. But then, once you hear from the finance minister, let's hear from those who actually live, breathe, feel the economy on a daily basis, and see if they are beginning to feel this as well. And that will eventually translate into what you feel in your pocket, on your table, and in your homes and businesses. Stay with me after the break. My guests will join me. And thanks for staying with us. Joining me in the studio tonight is Mark Bedu-Abuaje. He's the CEO of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he joins us in the studio. They live, they feel, they breathe the economy on a daily basis, so I want to tap into what he makes of the the finance minister's assessment. And also joining me is Professor Godfred Bokwe, who is economist and professor of finance at the University of Ghana. And Professor William Pepra also joins us. He's a professor of finance at the Andrews University, Michigan. There are two props on Zoom. The man on the ground is with me in the studio. So I want to start with you. So yesterday, the finance minister did a very significant briefing on the back of the IMF program, was to update us, but also give us a sense of the benefits that we are already deriving from the IMF program. I mean, from a business point of view, have you begun to see, are you experiencing any positive turns from the IMF program just yet?
Well, admittedly, I think if you had not secured the IMF deal, things would have been worse than what we're experiencing now. So on that score, I think there are some positive signs. However, I will look at the minister's statement in the context of what the business community would ordinarily look at. If those things are improving, then all of us can see. A typical case is inflation. Of course, we've seen that it has trended down from the 54.1% that we experienced in December. In April, it was 41.1%. And then in May, it moves to 42.2%, which means that there have been at least a 1% increment. Obviously, the reasons for the increment, one is because of the taxes that were introduced, which is largely because of the IMF program, and also the utility adjustment. So on that score, we realize that the IMF program is rather making things worse for businesses. If you take policy rate, the last time the governor announced the policy rate, it was maintained at 29.5. Yeah. That means that the lending rates basically are almost the same over the period, all things being equal, which means that nothing has really changed. Businesses are still borrowing at a rate of 30 to 45% based on your risk profile. Utility prices, tariffs, they've all gone up, both water and electricity. The depreciation or the strength of the cedi, we were actually expecting that there will be a significant drop so that the cedi will put up a strong performance against the major trading currencies. It's been still hovering around 12%. There have been some stability around it. So if you put all these things together, the cost of production has not really changed. So if we are expecting that the IMF program will actually improve the cost of production and to ensure that businesses now have some relief and some respite. But for now, I can confidently say that nothing has really changed. Looking at the business environment, we are hopeful that it will improve. I think that we should also be measured in the way we are reporting some of this positive. I think it's too short a time for us to go around saying that we have achieved that much, in the sense that macroeconomic policies are such that you can't have a change in the variables overnight. It takes some time, and sometimes they are lax, and the pass-through effect takes much time. So we are hopeful, very optimistic, that the environment will improve. But for now, looking at the variables and indicators that I have mentioned, personally, and then also speaking for the business community, I haven't really seen much change. And of course, when businesses are doing well, prices are going down, then the ordinary citizen who goes to the market to buy the product that we produce and the services will also see the reduction in prices. A typical case, or as a critical question, whether for a normal Ghanaian, they have seen a reduction in prices, and they will say no, because even the fuel prices that were coming down, we've seen for some time.
They're beginning to inch up again.
Yes, they are inching up. And of course, although we have not seen any increase in fares, lorry fares, I mean, the likelihood that these things will come is also there. So we are happy we have IMF deal. We are happy it's going to transform into an improvement in the macroeconomic environment and bring some stability. But for me, within this short time, I haven't seen a respite.
Well, what about the confidence that you were expecting? I remember the day you were here when we were anticipating the IMF deal to go through. You were looking forward to the announcement, bolstering confidence in business and industry, and so you can get more investors. And in fact, you had said that there were some investors who had called and they were waiting for the deal to be announced, and then they will come in and make the investment. Has that been one of the dividends that you've noticed?
Yes, for me, that is one of the positives that we have received. Largely, we've been able to restore some level of confidence and some certainty. And of course, it's because of that even the multilaterals and the bilateral community are also willing to give some money to us. In the business community, I mean, you see people calling and showing signs that they are willing to come. The likelihood that the FDIs will improve up to the end of the year is there. So on that score, I think it's a positive sign. The confidence is there. And we need that confidence as well as businesses to be able to grow and expand.
And I'll isolate soon some of the key things that the finance minister talked about business, because we focus quite a lot on how to improve the business environment for yourselves going forward and some of the measures that they want to introduce. I'll come to that shortly. Let me go to Professor Bokpin. Prof, was it premature for the finance minister to give this assessment weeks after the IMF program?
Well, I wouldn't say it is premature. I think that is consistent with economic strategy, right? To regularly update the markets is very, very important. But in that same, in the spirit of updating the media and the general public, the content, what you put out there must reflect reality. Otherwise, you may end up actually undoing the credibility that the program seeks to bring. And why am I saying so? So generally, we will say that, yes, the timing is also appropriate. Why? Because the IMF had just concluded their mission to Ghana, their review. They had issued their statement and the rest of them. If you remember, one of the things the finance minister failed to do in the run-up to the IMF program was the lack of update, okay, and regularly updating the market. And we could see government strategy when it came to COVID. With a regular update, it helps to moderate uncertainty. But we're not getting that from the finance on the economy. So I would say that in terms of the timing and the rest of them, I will side with the finance minister. But my problem is more of the content, right? It appears the government is in a hurry to harvest dividend that hasn't been declared. That is actually not on the ground. In as much as positive news really moderate uncertainty relative to negative news of the same side, what you put out there must reflect reality. It must be driven by data. So, because the idea is that unlike the days a couple of decades ago, where government only had access to the data and they interpret it the way they want it, now the data is available. Okay, the data is available. So you telling investors that things are improving and all of that, they are also looking at the hard data. They are looking at the soft data. And if what you put out there doesn't match with the data, then you will actually be running into some kind of inconsistency, and it will lean towards lack of policy credibility. And I'll give you a couple of examples.
To the facts of what the finance minister said yesterday, doesn't it check out? Doesn't it match the reality? So he talks about inflation. He talks about 91-day T-bill rate declining. He talks about current account balance. He talks about recent GDP statistics showing that we are doing far better. Yeah. He talks about the rate of inflation. That's the depreciation, the rate of depreciation of the city, and all these factors that he throws in to show that we're on a positive trajectory.
Yeah, we are not discounting that. The interpretation that you put on that data must be measured, right? So if you say inflation has come down, I mean, inflation is 42-point-something%, right? In fact, it's one of the highest in Africa. Remember that if you are talking about investors, they have options. They have option of going to Cote d'Ivoire, they have option of going to other countries. Particularly, it's not so difficult now that we are talking about African continental free trade. So we've seen some kind of stability, and you will see, and I agree with Dr. Abidu Abwaji that, you know what, the honeymoon surrounding the IMF program approval seems to be over. Okay.
Already?
And now
It's just been a few weeks.
yes. No, because you know what? It has to be sustained. Okay, so if you look at the way the CD responded to the program announcement, okay, so you can look at the pre-program announcement and 5 days after the program announcement. If you look at it within an event study, it tells you clearly that the honeymoon of the IMF program is over. Now it's down to work. Now, if you look at the way the program is structured, for your foreign reserves to actually increase significantly, we need to now see how the bilateral debt restructuring and the rest of them would actually kick in quite quickly. And that doesn't depend so much on us, right? So because if you look at the total inflows programmed in the IMF document, okay, what the IMF has given is just a small percentage of that. Okay, and then if you say that your current account has improved and the rest of them, if you lift the veil, you will see clearly that the first quarter of this year, we have basically suspended the economy. Okay, so there's a general slowdown in imports. You know that also has implication for growth, right? Because more than 70% of business input cost is imported. So once general import has slowed, that's implication. Your current account balance is positive because you suspended coupon payment on your external debt, okay, and the rest of them. So you want to look at all of this and then you judge that in the context of sustainability. And that is, so all that I'm saying is that yes, the IMF program has kicked in, but there's a lot of work we need to do, and we have to be measured in terms of the positive spin that we put on it, and that it must also connect with the way people are also looking at assessment and the rest of them. Other than that, they will not take your verdict to be the case.
Let me bring in Professor Prafran to the Prof. Do you agree that yes, the timing, there's nothing wrong with that, but the facts and the figures and the content must match the reality? And then the next question that automatically follows is, do you consider that what we've heard from the finance minister yesterday actually matches the reality?
Good evening, Evans, and to Prof. and Doug also. So my assertion is that let me put it, two main elements of going to IMF that we have benefited from is openness and accountability. So we've noticed that now the finance minister is being open and talking to us now, giving us the data. In terms of accountability, we realized that even before going to IMF, certain things that were not done or were not disclosed to us, maybe from the perspective of internal auditors' report, they were asked to disclose. What has currently happened is that the rate of growth before Ghana going to IMF was too rapid, and we could not sustain that kind of growth. That was why we were borrowing to match up that kind of growth that we were experiencing. And when your country is growing too fast, you tend to see your inflation rate moving up. And if you don't have the money to match up the growth, you will borrow. And in that effect, you see worsening situation of your balance of payment. So that was what was happening. For Ghana going to IMF, what we have seen in the shortest possible term, which is an element of confidence, is that we have seen that though we have suspended payment to our external debtors, we have seen that our current of payment account has become positive.
Yes.
If we were to make those payments, the situation would have not been the same. That is why Professor Bob Kane is saying that we have suspended the economy in terms of such situation, and probably it is also a strategy. To me, if it were in the IMF program, I'm sure all of us by now would have seen that our currency would have devalued more or become very bad. Look at December, we were doing 30% in terms of depreciation, and we have seen it being reduced. The benefit is that now companies can plan. There is that kind of stability because foreign currencies are not fluctuating too often. That would distort planning. In the short term, I'm sure companies can now plan for, let's say, 3 months because our foreign exchange position has improved.
I mean, and that point is important. But stay with me because I have in the studio. Is that something that you realize?
Yes.
Are you able to plan now?
I think there is high level of stability, so it will enhance planning. So for businesses, one thing that we look out for is ability to plan for short to medium term, so that when you are putting in your investment, you know how the situation will be. And for some time now, since the IMF deal was announced, at least we've seen some stability in the foreign exchange market, which is very important, because a chunk of what we do, as Prof. Ali said, depends on the foreign exchange market, what we are importing and what we are using the CD for. So on that score, I think that is positive. Businesses can plan.
Okay.
So we are happy about that.
But you made a point earlier that you were expecting the CD to be stronger, far stronger than it is currently.
Exactly. There are two things. If it's stable,
you can plan with it.
You can plan with it. Yeah. But if you're able to also reduce, or the CD is able to put up a strong performance, then the better it is for us, because we'll be able to export things at a lower rate, and whatever that we are using the CD for, we'll be able to get it at a lower rate, and that will also translate into a lower prices and cost of production to us.
And then, of course,
our expectation actually was to see the CD appreciate to a large extent, which, of course, immediately we are not going to get it. We are not experiencing it, but the stability that we are experiencing now, at least now be able to plan around 12 CDs, and I think you are okay to go.
To go. And Prof, so what do you make also, and this is Prof Prepa, on the comment by Prof Bokwing that the honeymoon period is over. Within 3 weeks, it's already gone, not just a month, it's already gone, because if you look at and that's what Mark Bedu-Abaji has just been talking about, the expectation was that the city would have strengthened even more, but yes, there's stability. Do you agree that we've lost that honeymoon period?
I mean, well, I Prof is here. He may explain what he meant by honeymoon. But if you ask me, the finance minister, what IMF has really done is to let him work. In the past, I would say he was not working. He was just approving whatever comes on his table for payments. But now, every item that comes onto his table, he's going to ask himself, is it in line with the PC-PEG policy? So he's not going to have that kind of, let me put it, enjoyment, if that is what Prof terms as honeymoon. But he has to now work. In the past, where he agreed that within the shortest period, the government should go and build 111 hospitals, knowing that you don't have the money to do that. Let me put it in our language. We were balancing short-term stabilization for long-term development. But this is what must be done now. That honeymoon where he was checking everything, we can pay, we can go ahead and do all these kind of expenses, capital expenditure items, and also not checking current expenditure items. That honeymoon is over. This is the time for him to work. He needs to be able to find a balance. So if Prof is saying that honeymoon period, where probably you have seen that confidence is coming into the economy, and it's time for him to, if you ask me, this is the time for him to sit down and work. And one other aspect I've noticed, he's traveling too much. It is good that he builds connection with external parties. He may have to open his eyes and now follow the books himself. If he's not moved as the finance minister and he's going to work, he needs to sit down and check every box of expenditure that comes on his table in line with the PC-PEG program. Then we can be able to say that we bring the economy back. If not, if he keeps on traveling and people do things behind his back, and we know in Ghana this is very common, the situation, we will not get a benefit as we are expecting. So I'll agree with Prof if he says that we are off the honeymoon period. It means that, in my understanding, this is the time for the finance minister to stay in his office and to be working.
Yeah, but on that point, actually yesterday when he spoke, he made a specific issue on the travels he did shortly after the IMF program was announced, also after the staff level agreement was also announced, because that was necessary to get the international buy-in. If you look at the significant bilateral, multilateral investments that are coming in, you must necessarily go there to get it, and which is important.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for him to go, to travel, but if he can ask one of his deputies to do that, then we know that he is in the country managing the economy. If you really look at what happened in the past, let's check his traveling itineraries before we went to IMF. You will see that he was traveling more, and some people were doing his work for him.
I mean, Prof. Bokwing, on the subject, though, of some of this, let's go to some of the specifics that the finance minister talked about yesterday in terms of the benefits to this country of the IMF program that we've seen. He's laid out a vision that he expects the IMF program to deliver, including improving private sector, business environment, but also sparing growth. Some very ambitious targets that had been set, and he believes that now we're on a path to that recovery. Based on what we've seen already and what we expect to come with all the monies, almost $2 billion this year alone, will that in itself put us on the path to recovery? And what else must we do to get that recovery on that trajectory?
Well, Evans, the IMF program is very clear that in terms of growth, things are going to get worse before they start to improve. And that is why I'm saying that the finance minister ought to be measured, right? Because what is in the program must be consistent with the interpretation you put out there. Growth is going to decelerate this year from 3.2% last year to 1.5% this year. So, and this is consistent with the objectives of fiscal consolidation that would impose immediate costs. There's adjustment, there's sacrifice. Okay, so growth will be sacrificed in the first year of implementation largely. Now, if growth is going to decelerate from 3.2% of 2022 to 1.5% in 2023, that has implication for job creation. Okay, that has implication for income growth. That has implication for consumption. Now, given that the rate of population growth in Ghana is around 2%, once your GDP growth will be lower than that, then in per capita terms, your economy would go through recession before recovery starts. So that's why I'm saying that let's be very measured. We've seen some positive news, we've seen some stability and the rest of them, but there's a lot of work that we have to do.
Yeah, listen to the finance minister on that point. He says right now, what the policies they're introducing is aimed at improving the business environment, reducing the cost of doing business, enhancing export competitiveness, all on the back of the IMF program. And in addition, they're also going to be looking at local content regulations that will be amended so that we can give our local businesses a competitive edge. He has a clear strategy, and all of that includes improving the business environment.
I don't have a problem with that. Evans, what I'm telling you is that the IMF program, the fiscal adjustment in terms of taxes, in increasing revenue, is going to have implication for the available free cash flow to private sector to expand. Again, if you look at the adjustment in terms of revenue enhancement, that is expected to contribute almost 3% of GDP. And then expenditure cuts. Then Evans, look at the areas government is cutting. Let's go back to the program. Government is hoping to cut capital spending and make savings of 0.9%. Mm-hmm. This is the country that has huge infrastructure deficits, potholes all over the place. And potholes in some places in Ghana are arranged in such a way that you can't miss both, no matter how careful you are, right? But government is going to cut capex. Government is going to limit hiring. So that is public sector itself. They are going to limit hiring. They are going to limit wage increases, and they are hoping that there will be fiscal savings from that point. Then transfers to statutory bodies are all going to be rationalized. These are the expenditure cuts. In the immediate, all of this will have implication. Okay, cut in general goods and services and the rest of them. And we have said that in as much as we agree with the expenditure cut in the program would affect growth. Okay, the kind of expenditure cut we expect is not what they are doing. Okay, it's not what they are doing. Then the other thing to look at is that if you say you want to promote private sector growth, create the enabling environment, you ask yourself whether the level of taxes, okay, that have been approved this year is consistent with creating enabling business environment. That is no. Look at the plan. Let's be very careful. You look at the plan utility adjustments under the program and see whether that is consistent with creating enabling business environment.
Well, you make that point. And because I have with me the CEO of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I need to put that
let me make my final point here.
Yeah, okay, sure. Because I want to get his verdict on the point you made.
Look, the finance minister is very busy trying to woo external investors. And I agree with Prof. Pepra that stay on the ground here. Restore confidence in the domestic financial market. The finance minister should tell us when is he going to clear all bond arrears, especially to pension holders, pensioners. I hope that is okay. So you can do all the talking in building confidence from external point of view, but it must be consistent with what is happening on the ground. What is government plan in terms of old bonds? Okay, because we need to restart our capital markets. For me, that is even more important than the foreign trip to woo foreign investors, because we must be deliberate about growing indigenous private sector and indigenous private capital in here. Okay, so we need to calm the system. Look, you are talking about treasury bill being more than 19%. Government objective under the domestic debt exchange is to introduce a new yield curve below 15%. We have not been able to achieve that. Look at where treasury bill rate is now. And you ask yourself whether if government issue bonds next week, will you go and buy it?
But that though, the current treasury bill rate has fallen from 35%. So it's an improvement.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. What I'm saying is that we had an objective with the domestic debt exchange in introducing a new yield curve. And that is how can reduce the old bonds average coupon yield from 19.3% to about 8.3% under the new bond yields, right? And extended the maturity profile. We couldn't keep the treasury bill rate low because inflation is particularly high.
Yeah.
Okay. And if Bank of Ghana is of the same view that things are going to improve as the finance minister holds the same view, then the policy rate should respond accordingly.
Stay with me. Mr. Baji, the point that he makes there earlier about the growth, of course, I just put it to him, the finance minister spent a lot of time trying to talk up what is going to happen in the back of the IMF program to help businesses thrive. But he says part of the IMF program is going to prove counterproductive.
Of course.
You agree with the point?
Totally agree with him. In fact, if you look at the program represented, the PCPEG, at the root of it is that the private sector is the one that is going to take out of this.
Exactly.
Malice. So everything that the minister is saying about improving the environment for businesses, for me, is right. But how are you going to do that when within that same program, you are introducing a lot of taxes? We are not able to even to cope with the existing taxes. And now we have introduced 3 new taxes, for which reason inflation and other things are going up. Within that same program, you see utility prices or tariffs changing quarterly. And somewhere stated that there's going to be an ad hoc change in utility tariffs, which means that if they realize that they are not able to recover, they can also come and announce an increase in utility tariffs. We've seen within the same document there is going to be monetary tightening, which means that the policy rate either will go up, will be maintained at the same level of 29.5%, which is the highest in this country. And that means that interest rates are still going to be high. How do you create that environment? How do you improve the business environment when we have all these counterproductive policies as part of the IMF? So I've been wondering how he's going to do that. If they are able to do that, for us, the better it is for us, because businesses are waiting for such environment to take advantage of it, to expand and also create more jobs. But if you just say it and just pay lip services to it, then people will begin to doubt your credibility when it comes to policies. That the things that you said you are going to do, you've not done them. So the next time when you come around and you promise businesses, we are going to look at it with a double eye to see whether you'll be able to do it. We need that environment. But the policies in the program
must deliver that. He says, for example, they're going to be launching the Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogue to encourage domestic and external investors to be a core part of our growth agenda. And they'll be working with Ghanaian businesses, entrepreneurs, etc., to do this. You're happy to participate in this?
Of course. I mean, right from day one, you've asked that there is a need for us to engage, to dialogue, to look at what we can do together. For me, when we come together, businesses are the ones bearing the brunt or feeling the pinch of all that is going on. And we also have some recommendations, some suggestions to be made to ensure that we come out of these difficult situations. So when we judge or we sit down and we all agree, then you also will get a buy-in from us that whatever we are going through, we all are working towards an end that will be beneficial to us. We all have to sacrifice now, and in the end, we all benefit from it. Then people will begin to now be part of the process of improving the environment. But when you don't involve us, then we also sit back and then do what we have to do. But if now they have recognized that they need us, they have recognized that we need to dialogue, and that is one of the reasons why they are stating it, then we are ready to support.
A few specifics in terms of how they want to help you thrive. One is fast-tracking the implementation of the key growth-oriented programs under the Ghana Cares program, and specifically, they want to the economic enclave projects. They want to bring it back to enable self-sufficiency in rice, maize, vegetables, and poultry, right? Which
I think I said the last time I came here, I made mention of this particular project. For me, it's one of the key projects that we have to pay particular attention to, because we need to be sustainable in the basic things that we import. If you are able to get a rice, you are able to get a poultry, most of the things that we are importing, if you are able to produce them locally, then we didn't put much pressure on the
one of the policies that the Bank of Ghana introduced was to curtail the supply of dollars for the import of some of these products that we can produce locally. Should that policy be maintained?
Yes, for me, that is the reason why the bit of improving the business environment is very relevant. If you are saying that people should not import, but the businesses in the country are also finding it difficult to produce the things that we are not getting the dollar to import, then you are also starving the citizenry of some of the products and services that they need. But if you have created the environment, if you have empowered the private sector, giving them the incentives to produce the things that we are importing, then all of us will be free. And also encourage all of us to consume the things that we are producing locally. So it's going to be a win-win affair for the government and for the business community. And for us, much as we are looking to make profit from whatever we are doing, that is why we set up a business. We are not Father Christmas. We are also seeking to ensure that we have an economy that is sustainable and resilient to any shocks that will come to us. And businesses, I know, will take advantage and also expand to employ more people.
I mean, Professor Prepra, so I see there's a conflict between what the finance minister anticipates will happen with the turning around of the economy on the back of the IMF, but also what the business says the reality is, which is that some of the IMF-linked policies themselves are counterproductive. So how do you net this off to deliver eventual growth in the end and deliver us from this current economic crisis?
Evans, so I'll tell you my simple analysis of the finance minister's plan. So what I've noticed is that though finance controls power or moves the economy, his plan, and as confirmed by the IMF program, is to cause a reduction in growth. And that kind of reduction and also increase domestic revenue mobilization in terms of taxes. And as the government is trying to do that, and go back to the last two budgets of the finance minister, you will see that he made a strong argument for increase in tax rate percentage against the GDP.
Yes.
That was why he was pushing for the e-levy and stuff. So he's not gone against his own strategy. So all his strategy is to find ways to increase domestic taxation to 18% to the 20% that he planned. And by so doing, it's really affecting local, let me put it, the businesses in Ghana. I noticed that the finance minister also is trying to build a link between external businesses. I don't know how he wants to do it, whether they want to bring them in to focus on the agriculture sector, because that was what I heard him saying.
Yeah.
Could it be that this is my simple analysis, that there is that kind of disconnection between the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Agriculture on what strategy? Remember, we just did youth employment or youth in agriculture programs and stuff. Can we go back to strengthen that sector to be able to take up the unemployment youth into agriculture instead of trying to woo investors from outside to come and take up our agricultural sector? This is my simple assertion. I also see that there's that kind of disconnection between the Trade Ministry and the Ministry of Finance. Who is championing bringing in these external investors? You mentioned the finance minister said he had to go out to go and see two major investors, one in South Africa and in South Korea.
Yeah.
What is the trade ministry doing? Is it that because we have new ministers, they don't have the strategy? I'm making this assessment and coming back to my point that the finance minister must stay home and be working for us. He must not take up the duties of other ministries, though they, in a way, his ministry will put all their quantitative data for whatever they are doing. But we may have to see the other ministries organizing seminars, conferences, having the dialogues, not to be led by the finance ministry. His duty is to bring economic stability and make sure that other ministries are really working. If you ask me, let me ask this question. What has been the point being made by the Ministry of Agric? We don't know in terms of the IMF program. But when you read the document, you will see they have roles to play. Ministry of Trade, what has been their role? The Energy Ministry, we know, what are they saying about the energy sector debt? It is something that the ministry must take up. If not, the finance minister will be going round and doing other ministries' job. And by the time he realizes, he will forget that his duty is to ensure economic stability. And that is my assertion, that he may have to stay home, give room to other ministers to work, other ministries, and all he needs to do is to monitor that whatever they are doing ties in with the program that we have. If you're able to do that, you will be able to find a balance. If not, and the finance minister is the one doing all these things, his plan will only be looking at one particular thing. How do I bring in foreign currency to be able to show up my balance of payment and control exchange rate devaluation? So if it's about trade...
Prof Bokwe, thank you very much for joining me. And as we know, we're still in the early days of the program, and so we'll be assessing as and when the finance minister, he'll be going for media budget review next month, so that gives us another opportunity. But I'm curious, before we go, Mr. Abache, so you've said you're willing to sit and talk on the back of the IMF. Has the finance ministry or government reached out for a conversation at all? Because they're proposing a dialogue, a Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogue agenda. Has anybody reached out?
Not yet, but in the document, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry is mentioned as one of the institutions that they will get in touch with. So we are patiently waiting for them to have an engagement with them so that together we can move the economy forward. Okay,
if I asked you to tell me one thing that you put on the table, if you sit, one demand, if you like, that you'll be pushing, what would that be?
Would be to review the taxes, bring them down. And I think at this very level, it's too high for any business to survive. And of course, the effect is there for all of us to see. So if there is any opportunity, if you have to tell the minister one thing, is to take a second look at the 3 taxes that
they introduced before. And remember, those were prior actions, so you can't touch it now that you have the IMF deal. Thank you very much, Bidu Abuaje, and also enjoy the rest of your evening.